Ayan, the wonderful video that we have shown you today to save our watershed campaign can actually be found in the Facebook page of the Save Our Watershed the Facebook page. So we can just type that Save Our Watershed Sheds on Facebook. Okay, so that you can find the video material. Okay, all right. So good morning to everyone and welcome to the Forest Policy Etalks Watershed Management Webinar Series. This is in partnership with the DENR's Forest Management Bureau in support to the Forestland Management Project's #Save Our Watershed campaign. This is Michiko Buot of FDC, your MC for today. Let us see nga po. So before we start, before anything else, let us see nga po. Please type #Save Our Watershed sa Zoom chat box just as a sign of support to the cause. Okay? May I see? Say #Save Our Watershed, just a sign of support to this cause, to this advocacy that we are promoting. That's why we have our Watershed Management Webinar Series. Tama po ba? This is why we are joining from day one until now. So for the information of all, we are now on our third webinar of the series, and today we are going to discuss about sustainable watershed management. Ayan, so marami na pong nag-chat sa ating Zoom box. I think in the Facebook Live, we can also chat this in our comment section. So just type as a sign of your support, #Save Our Watershed. All right? Ayan, salamat po sa inyong cooperation and your spirit. We will need that for today, for this very eventful webinar, very educational, and marami po tayong matututunan, marami po tayong madi-discuss po talaga. So for the information of all, the first webinar is last August 4, where we talked about the evaluation of watershed ecosystem services. So that's the first webinar that is part of this series. The second one was on September 8. Are we there? Yung mga participants po ba natin ngayon naka-join po dun sa dalawang webinars po na yun? So dun September 8, we talked about key features and functions of watersheds in the Philippines. So basically a watershed 101. So now we are ready to move on to sustainable watershed management for our third webinar. So para po malaman po natin kung sino po yung mga naka-attend, alam po natin kung ano po ang kaalaman na ating mga participants, makita natin. We would like to play a little icebreaker through Menti again. So if you have a separate device beside you, a phone, maybe you are joining this Zoom webinar via your laptop, maybe you can just use your phone, a separate device, para po hindi na mahirapan na mag-login sa Google or Safari. Ayun. So just type menti.com o kaya picturean nyo lamang po yung QR code na nakikita nyo po dyan. If you have logged in or moved to the website po ng Mentimeter, you can just type in the code 7815 and 1754. Okay, so nandun na po ba tayong lahat? I will just stop sharing this. I will share the presentation na po, so that we can proceed to the Menti. Ayan, so meron na pong mga nagsagot. The first question is, so we have two questions for you today for our participants. Have you attended all three webinars of the Watershed Management Webinar Series? So the options are, yes, I attended them all. Second is, this is my first time attending, and then I have missed only one webinar kasi tatlo lamang naman po ang webinars pa po natin for this series. Ayan, I think so many of us are parang first timers, I guess. But maybe some of us hindi pa po nakaka-log in. So para po makapag-participate lahat po ng ating mga participants po sa ating Mentimeter, just go and just go to the website menti.com or just type in your Google search, Menti, lalabas na po ang Mentimeter website, and then just type the code 7815-1754. Okay? Ayan, siguro titignan na lamang po natin. Kung makikita po natin dito, no, so marami po tayo mga bagong participants. So thank you for your interest. Ibig sabihin, palawak ng palawak po ang sakop po ng advocacy po na ito. Ayan, so ibig sabihin, we are doing something right. Di ba po? At least in this webinar. So marami po tayong nasishiran ng knowledge about watersheds. Mas marami po ang nagkakaroon ng interest. Ayan. Salamat po. Now we can move on maybe sa second slide. Ayan. In 1 to 3 words, what is a new thing that you have learned about watersheds? Even po sa mga first-timers, sa mga first time pa lang po na naka-attend dito, you can already answer this question because you have already watched, di ba po? Watch the video earlier, which is very educational, very informational, and we can preview that watershed video through the Facebook page nga po ng Save Our Watershed. Ayan, thank you for participating. Merong nagsabi na important, merong nagsabi na it saves lives, tama po. Sustainable watershed. Ibig sabihin, you're very excited to really discuss about our topic for today, right? And then someone said, water is life, right? I have heard of that quotation so many times, and I agree. Yeah, integrated. Watershed provides. Tama po. Natural. Saan? It continues to move because so many of you have learned so much. It just means that so many of you has taken something new from our webinar series, and we are so thankful that we have learned that from you today. Management, conserve soil. So many of you have said, kasi po sa parang word map po na ito, we would know the most repeated words or most repeated answers by the bigger the text is. Ibig sabihin po, marami pong sumagot ng ganung answer. So marami pong sumagot ng word na management. Water is life. It saves lives, I think. Ayan, madami. Life. Watershed is life. Ayan, so salamat po sa inyong kooperasyon dahil ang ganda pong word map na nabubuon po natin. No? You can even take a screenshot po nitong presentation po na ito if you like. And then this is the last question. So I would just like to say thank you for cooperating, really. I will just stop sharing and ayan. But please, if you want to still contribute and you feel like marami pa po kayong gustong sabihin, you want to contribute more to that word map, you can still answer naman po. Ayan. Kasi patuloy pa rin naman po siya even though I have stopped the presentation now. All right, so it's 9:42 a.m. already. Thank you for participating. And now, without further ado, let us start this webinar officially with a prayer to be followed by the national anthem.
Dear God, thank you for allowing us today to meet and share our knowledge and time with one another in this webinar. We are truly grateful for all the blessings you have bestowed upon us. May you extend your divine wisdom to our speaker so that he would be able to impart effectively his God-given knowledge to all of us. Bless the participants as well so that they would be able to glean the vital information from this activity and spread what we've learned in the spirit of your love and generosity. May we realize that this activity should glorify your name. Amen.
Again, welcome to the Forest Policy Etalks Watershed Management Webinar Series. And today, as you all know, we are going to talk about sustainable watershed management. This webinar, again, is in partnership with the Forest Management Bureau in support to Forest Land Management Project's Save Our Watershed campaign, and powered by the UPLB Information Technology Center. Thank you po to our partners, our collaborators. By the way, we already have 507 participants here joining us in the webinar Zoom room. And then there are 132 Facebook Live viewers participating. I am participating via Facebook Live. And thank you all for participating. Thank you all for your interest. Again, sana po masustain po natin to until the day, until the last webinar episode of this series. Again, kindly check our Facebook page. As you have remembered in our house rules, it was said earlier, our Facebook page is at UPLB Forestry Development Center, or para po mas maikli, at UPLB FDC. And please kindly share our Facebook Live. And maybe later on, we can replay the whole webinar po. Yeah, so we are, of course, honored to have all of you here. I believe coming from different sectors, such as the SUCs, government agencies, the LGUs, private institutions, non-government organizations, and other stakeholders who share the same mission to save our watershed. So to brief everyone of the program, here is what we will expect for today. First, we will be listening to the welcome remarks by Professor Marlo D. Mendoza, our Dean of the UPLB College of Forestry Natural Resources. And then, of course, this will be followed by an opening remarks by Forester Marcial C. Amaro Jr., CESO 3, ASEC Policy Planning and Foreign Assistant and Special Projects, DNR, and Director FMB in concurrent capacity. All right. And then this will be followed, of course, by our speakers. The talks will be about the specific topics will be about guiding principles, processes, and activities in watershed management. That will be discussed by none other than Dr. Rex Victor O. Cruz, retired UPLB professor and NAST Academician. And then this will be followed by a talk by Forester Abel D. Lagon ENP, and he is from FMB po, from our partner. And then he will talk about the policies and programs related to watershed management. Of course, this will be followed by an open forum. We will have an opportunity to discuss all of these things there. Ayan po. And maybe ask our speakers, our experts of our questions related to the topic for today. So after that, the presentation of certificates, of course, and after that, the closing remarks of Dr. Priscila Dolom, Director of FDC. Ayan, so now that we are briefed and oriented po sa activity po natin for today, may I call on the Dean of the College of Forestry and Natural Resources, Dean Marlo D. Mendoza, to deliver the welcoming remarks.
Allow me first to extend my warm welcome and greetings to Forester Marcial C. Amaro Jr., SESO 3, Assistant Secretary, Policy Planning and Foreign Assisted and Special Projects, and Director, Forest Management Bureau in concurrent capacity. To our two distinguished speakers, Dr. Rex Victor O. Cruz, NAST Academician and retired professor, UPLB, CFNR. Forester Abel D. Lagon, ENT, Senior Forest Management Specialist, Watershed Ecosystem Management Section, Forest Resources Conservation Division of the FMB-DENR. The FDC Director, Dr. Priscila Dolom, and the FDC staff. To all our online participants, now numbering more than 500, plus the others viewing through the YouTube channel. A pleasant good morning to everyone. The CFNR once again welcomes everyone to the third Watershed Management Webinar Series, jointly organized by FDC and the Forest Management Program of the FMB-DENR in support of FMB's Save Our Watershed campaign. As you all know, and we continue to emphasize, the webinar series aims to enhance the knowledge and understanding of various stakeholders about watersheds, as well as create a venue for discussion on how we can collectively work together to promote and encourage best practices in watershed management, given the state of degradation of the country's watersheds. The CFNR would like to congratulate the FMB for prioritizing the topic on watershed management. The series of watershed webinars aims to introduce the basic concepts and principles on watershed management and science-based watershed management planning, and if conscientiously applied, will translate to a more effective and efficient implementation of watershed management programs and projects. The key is for all stakeholders to have a good appreciation of watershed functions, the underlying drivers of its degradation, and a common planning framework on how to effectively and efficiently manage and develop our watersheds. The first two webinars dealt with the topics on valuation of watershed ecosystem services and the key features and functions of watersheds and its current status. For this third webinar, the focus is on sustainable watershed management. As we all know, the goal of watershed management is the sustainable production of goods and services demanded by society without adversely affecting the sustainability of soil and water resources. That's from Dr. Cruz in 1999. A healthy watershed ensures continuous supply of water for agriculture, clean drinking water supply, as well as meet industry needs through the natural processes of water storage and recharge. But beyond this, a healthy watershed provides a wide range of other ecosystem goods and services that support the well-being of communities within it, provides habitat for wildlife, conserves soil fertility, controls soil erosion and flooding, and maintains the balance among the various ecosystems within it. The video that was shown already explains a lot about this. To achieve the above goals requires an appreciation and application of the principles and processes, responsive policies, strategic programs and projects, and good governance, particularly accountability, that make up the key elements of a well-managed watershed. I enjoin you to listen and participate later in the discussion as our speakers talk on what makes for a sustainably managed watershed. I hope this webinar will equip us, but more importantly, move us into action to save our life-giving watersheds. The CFNR is one with the FMB-DENR and with you, the various stakeholders in this very important endeavor. Marami pong salamat and mabuhay po tayong lahat.
Thank you, Dean. Maraming salamat din po sa inyo. And now, may I call on the Assistant Secretary for Policy Planning and Foreign Assisted Special Projects, DENR, and Concurrent Director of the FMB, ASEC Marcial C. Amaro, Jr.
Thank you, Ms. Michiko. A pleasant morning to everyone in this webinar. To those who are participating through Zoom, now over 500 warm bodies, and those joining through Facebook Live. I am glad that despite the situation, we were again given this opportunity to interact and discuss matters that we often take for granted, but which are truly important, the watersheds. First, let me acknowledge the key personalities who are with us in this event today. We have just heard Professor Marlo Mendoza, our Dean of the UP College of Forestry, UPLB College of Forestry and Natural Resources, our distinguished guest speakers and resource persons, Dr. Rex Victor Cruz, and our very own Forester Abel Lagon, who will be formally introduced later. And of course, the Director of the Forestry Development Center, Dr. Priscila Dolom, and all the distinguished and perhaps experts in this field, and those who are really interested in knowing more about watersheds. Warm welcome to everyone. Let me first extend my appreciation and gratitude to the Forestry Development Center for once again agreeing to host this event in partnership with the Forestland Management Project of the DNR and the Forest Management Bureau. This third webinar session of the Forest Policy Etalks Watershed Management Webinar Series is being conducted in support, as already mentioned, of the Save Our Watershed campaign of the Forest Management Project, which is now in its full stretch, and hopefully realizing our objective in really mobilizing people in our campaign of Save Our Watershed. The first session, as introduced and discussed earlier, discussed studies relative to the evaluation of ecosystem services. The second one gave us an overview of the characteristics and the current situation of the watersheds in our country. And today, we will learn more about watersheds, particularly on the application of the knowledge we gained from the earlier two watershed sessions in the sustainable watershed management topic, where we would be discussing guiding principles, processes, policies, and programs. Related to this subject, and for information of everyone, the Save Our Watershed campaign was launched during the Environment Month last June, with no less than our Secretary, the Honorable Roy A. Sima, to presiding, and this campaign is aimed at promoting conservation and sustainable watershed management of our watersheds. Particularly to the project, Forestland Management Project, it intends to encourage wider participation of stakeholders to sustain initiatives done on the ground and investments in the project sites, namely the Upper Magat and Cagayan River basins in the Cagayan Valley and the Cordillera Administrative Region, the Upper Pampanga River Basin in the Central Luzon Region or Region 3, and the Halao River Basin in Western Visayas or in Region 6. This campaign is also envisioned to become a platform for increasing and forging partnerships among the stakeholders within a watershed, such as the local government units, private sectors, the watershed management councils or bodies created, and the people's organizations towards holistic governance and management of our watersheds. As one of the activities of the Save Our Watershed campaign, the conduct of this webinar aims to increase the awareness of the public and encourage more participation and efforts in taking care of our watersheds. On top of these activities, the DNR is currently at the stage of having the final draft of the executive order on sustainable integrated watershed management, and for submission very soon to the Office of the President for their consideration and hopefully for issuance. The executive order shall provide mechanisms for collaborative watershed management that would integrate science-based approaches in sustainably managing our watersheds. Again, I would like for this third webinar session to invite everyone to visit and to follow the Save Our Watershed social media accounts on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to keep everyone posted on our future activities. Finally, I hope that our discussion today will be as engaging and as productive like the previous ones. And let me have this as a takeaway for everyone, that we should always bear in mind that saving watersheds is saving lives. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you, sir, for your remarks, for the valuable information that you've shared to us. And now we will be moving on to the paper presentations. For that, may I now call on my colleague, Mr. Raymond Vincent C. Cabrera, to introduce our resource speakers for today.
Yes, hello, Michiko. Good morning and good morning, everyone. To formally introduce our two speakers for today. Okay, let me start. For our first speaker is a retired professor at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, College of Forestry and Natural Resources. He obtained both his bachelor and master's degrees in forestry at UPLB. He also obtained his doctoral degree in watershed management at the University of Arizona, USA. Our first speaker is well known in the area of watershed management. He has also served as UPLB Chancellor, CFNR Dean, and FDC Director. Currently, he serves as a member of the People Survival Fund Board. Also one of the authors of the second, third, and fourth IPCC assessment reports. Furthermore, he became a member of the National Academy of Science and Technology in 2019 in recognition of his exemplary contribution to science and technology. That is our first speaker. For our second speaker, our second speaker is an environmental planner and forester employed at the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, DNR, for 7 years now. He obtained his Bachelor of Science in Forestry at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, and his master's degree in Environmental Science at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. He is currently a Senior Forest Management Specialist at the Watershed Ecosystem Management Section of the Forest Resources Conservation Division under the Forest Management Bureau. He specializes on risk mapping and system dynamics modeling with background on policy formulation, planning and programming, and project development, related to environment and natural resources conservation and management. So let us welcome our two speakers. The first one is Dr. Rex Victor O. Cruz and Forester Abel D. Lagon. So my call on Sir Rex. Sir Rex.
Yes, thank you very much, Raymond. And once again, thank you for inviting me to be one of your resource persons for this morning webinar series on watershed management. And before I move on, I'd like to greet especially our dignitaries in this webinar. We have Assistant Secretary Marcial C. Amaro Jr., who is concurrently directing the Forest Management Bureau, and of course our Dean at the College of Forest and Natural Resources, Professor Marlo D. Mendoza, and to the Director of FDC, Dr. Priscila C. Dolom, and to all staff of FMB, of Forest Land Management Project, and of FDC, and to all our guests and participants to this webinar. Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. It's my privilege to once again present to you concepts about watershed management. And as the objectives of the webinar was mentioned to you, it is meant to increase awareness about watershed management. But to a number of you, or to many of you, this will be, again, as I said in my previous webinar, that this is a refreshment. This is a review, brush up, on what you already know. And hopefully this will continue to reinforce your skills and knowledge on watershed management that will translate to good practices, whether it is in the realm of policy, or in the realm of governance, or in the realm of actual practices on the ground. So I hope that everybody will profit from this discussion. Let me now, okay, I'm supposed to be talking to you for 40 minutes. So that means I should end by, okay. That will be, I know that. I marked it already on my watch. So let me now start my screen sharing. And I hope that everyone can see my my presentation. Okay. So the title of my presentation is actually, guiding principles and processes and activities in watershed management, but I put it under the broader topic on science-based watershed management, which I believe is at the center of watershed management as we apply them now in our current conditions. So let me begin, with the basic definition of watershed management. Watershed management is the regulation and control of the uses of land, water, and other natural resources in a watershed, applying science and technology to achieve sustainability of water supply and other ecosystem services. So please note, that watershed management is the control or use of land and water and other natural resources in the watershed, applying science and technology, specifically, referring to or directing your attention to the regulation and control of uses of watershed resources. Okay. It used to be, especially when I was a young student in watershed management, that our concept then on watershed management was mainly focused on water resources. Okay. But of course, with the growing awareness and growing understanding on various ecosystems and various resources and various driving forces interacting within a watershed, we began to understand that watershed management will not be successful unless, unless we expand our concern beyond water resources, but to actually encompass all other resources that we find in the watershed, including human resources. Okay, so take note of this definition. When we manage the watershed, we manage the totality of the entire watershed, from the ridge all the way to the coastal area. And again, emphasizing that we are referring to the management of a whole watershed, and a whole watershed extends from the top of the mountains all the way to the sea. And again, we are going out of the used to be paradigm that we have, that watersheds are just limited to areas that are in mountainous part of the landscape. So a watershed management, has several important realities that we must understand and that we must be reminded of. Okay, it reflects the complexity of watershed as a system. Okay, and when we look at the watershed, we have to look at it, as a system with many stakeholders that demands, that has multiple demands on the watershed for various goods and services, and that the watershed as a system has multiple functions, and that the resources, land, water, etc., in the watershed has multiple or have multiple uses, and that inside the watershed you have multiple LGUs sharing jurisdiction over one watershed, and you have multiple national government agencies with overlapping jurisdiction and programs, and you have multiple ecosystems that are interconnected and are sensitive to human activities, as we have learned from our previous webinar, and that a watershed is exposed to multiple stressors, including climate change, land use change, and other human activities. The goals of watershed management, as I was alluding to in the definition of the watershed, is not only the sustainability of water, but also the sustainability of all ecosystem services, and including optimum economic benefits that we derive from the watershed. That is the goal. We're not only concerned about water, but we are concerned about everything else in the watershed. Why? Because based on our learning in the previous webinar, watershed basically encompass, all land area that we have in the country. There is just but a few, areas that may be difficult to define, as areas within watershed boundaries. But most of our land area, most of our spaces on the ground are part of watersheds. Okay, and hence, when we talk about watershed management, we are basically talking about the entire land or entire space that we have in our country. So, we engage in management activities. We use land, we use other watershed resources for protection, ecological, or production and economic purposes. Those are the two major activities that we do inside the watershed. And in doing these activities, we must be aware of the constraints that we should not breach or that we should not ignore. And these constraints include minimizing the alteration of hydrological processes, minimizing the impairment of soil permeability, and maintaining adequate vegetation cover. These are the constraints. We cannot violate this, we cannot ignore this, because in doing so, we will consign our watersheds to forever deterioration and degradation beyond repair. Now with this, we are able now to we are able to attain our goal of promoting the sustainability of ecosystem services that are being delivered by ecosystems found inside our watersheds. That include provisioning, which is basically economic, regulating, which is basically ecological, supporting, which is ecological and environmental, and cultural, which is social. Watershed management is also about promoting healthy forests to sustain downstream ecosystem services. At the very heart of watershed management is the concern to promote healthy forests in order to prevent accelerated erosion or excessive soil erosion, so that we can ensure that there will be abundant supply of clean water, and so that we can have healthy biodiversity. That is the very foundation of healthy ecosystems if our ecosystems are to deliver sustainably the vital ecosystem services that we are enjoying. And a good or healthy forest sustains agriculture, agroforestry, grasslands, which are our agro ecosystems. And these agro ecosystems can only produce high food production and sustainable land productivity if our forests are healthy, if they can supply the needed water for agriculture, if they can maintain high biodiversity so that the population of potential pests, insects, and other organisms are regulated with the healthy ecosystems, and that from our healthy watersheds, we are able to provide other vital ecological services important to maintaining a good genetic pool for our agro ecosystems. And then healthy forest also promotes healthy lakes and wetlands. Remember, lakes and wetlands are supplied with fresh water coming from our watersheds, and their productivity are dependent on the quality of water that they get from the watersheds or being supplied, from within the watershed, the sustainability of biodiversity and groundwater recharge, which is a major function of lakes and wetlands. And then healthy forest is also necessary, essential to maintaining healthy urban ecosystems, to make it a safe area for settlement so that commerce and industry will flourish, and so that communities will be secured and healthy. And of course, lastly, a healthy forest is also essential to maintain healthy mangroves, coastal and marine ecosystems. If we want to see high productivity in mangrove, coastal and marine ecosystems, we need fresh water coming from our watershed, clean, not totally devoid or not totally without sediments, because they need certain amount of sediments carrying nutrients that will give them the necessary nourishment, okay, to be productive. And then so that our coastal and mangrove ecosystems can provide adequate coastal production and so on. Watershed management is also about promoting sustainability of ecosystems in the watershed from ridge to reef. Again, we talked about the different ecosystems that are interconnected within a watershed in the previous webinar. And our task in watershed management is to make sure that these ecosystems remain sustainable. And one thing we should remember is that one ecosystems in a watershed cannot be unsustainable, okay? For if it happens, then all ecosystems within the watershed will likely become unsustainable. And hence, our goal will be to promote sustainability of all ecosystems concurrently. Parang sa tao yan yung motto natin, walang iwanan or walang dapat maiwan. Okay? Pag merong naiwan na isang ecosystems, okay, the entire chain of ecosystems and ecosystem services will break down. Now, if we see, for instance, that our urban ecosystems are unsustainable, because of high risk due to multiple hazards such as coastal flooding, tidal flooding, the fluvial flooding, or flooding due to excessive rainfall. And then if they are unsustainable because of poor planning, because of suboptimal use of urban areas, because of poor enforcement of development controls, and because of poor access of people or residents to basic services, that will drive expansion and relocation, okay? In addition to the pressure that is already being exerted by growing urban population, okay? Now, that expansion and relocation demand of urban ecosystems will pressure our agroecosystems that are already beset also with its own problems related to suboptimal crop yield due to climate change, suboptimal use of agricultural land, such as growing crops where they are not suitable, and then land conversion, erosive and polluted farm practices, and weak enforcement of regulatory controls. Now, add to that the expansion and relocation, you make agroecosystems very unstable, very unsustainable, okay? That can decrease its productivity, and because the demand or the productivity of agroecosystems is increasing, it is but natural that there will be a resulting drive or demand to expand as well, to compensate to what is lost through land productivity decline due to climate change and due to expansion and relocation of urban areas. That now causes problems to our forests that are also beset already with its own problems, such as poor governance, poor planning, weak law enforcement, lack of incentives to investors, and lack of conversion. Of course, we are seeing, positive developments in our government, with our colleagues working hard, to turn around Philippine forestry in terms of governance, in terms of planning and law enforcement. Soon we will see more sustainable forests, but that cannot be, that cannot only rely on those developments. We must also address the pressure coming from outside the forest ecosystem, and that pressure is mostly coming from agriculture. If you can remember in the previous webinar series natin, agriculture is the leading driver of forest degradation and deforestation. So what we are saying here is that, yes, we can correct our weaknesses within the forestry sector, but if we cannot address the weaknesses of forestry coming from the pressures outside the forest ecosystem, such as expansion of agriculture, then our task will be very difficult. It has to be addressing our challenges within and challenges coming from without, and that is the task of watershed management. All right, and then we are also in watershed management. We are also in the business of solving interconnected problems, addressing issues and concerns that are not mutually exclusive but are inclusive. Okay, and these problems, as we can see in many of our watersheds, we have encroachment, biodiversity loss, forest degradation, forest fragmentation, forest cover loss, and then this is connected with the problems of agroecosystems, land conversion, soil degradation, diminishing land productivity, and which is also connected to the problems of urban ecosystems, or that aggravates the problems of urban ecosystem, as well as the problems of coastal, marine, and mangrove ecosystems, and of lakes and wetlands, and our rivers and grassland areas. And so, as you can see, these problems are all inside the watershed. Now we cannot just focus on one problem, and expect that our whole watershed will remain sustainable. Okay, as we continue to ignore a problem in one part of the watershed, such as, for instance, urban ecosystems, for as long as we consider it a problem not of our own or not of watershed management, that problem that emanates or originates from urban ecosystems will grow, and to a point that we will not be able, or that will be very difficult for us to reverse or to resolve in the future. So when we talk about problems of watersheds, let's not be concerned only about the problems in our forest ecosystems, because the problems in agriculture, the problems in urban areas, and even the problems in our mangrove and coastal areas, are going to undermine, okay, the sustainability of the entire watershed if, if we will not rather, expand our focus watershed wide. And then we are also in the business of promoting coordination, collaboration amongst concerned national government agencies. Here you see, all these government agencies are operating within most of our watersheds. And if these government agencies, cannot work together, cannot collaborate with each other, cannot coordinate their programs, cannot harmonize their programs, cannot synchronize their programs, then it will be difficult to ensure that our watersheds will be sustainable. Okay, and again, this is one problem that is outside the forestry sector. Okay, we need to look at mechanisms and strategies by which different national government agencies can come together and work together, along one common framework. That will be my topic for the next webinar series, so don't miss it. Okay, so don't miss it. How watershed can provide a physical platform where these different government agencies can coexist and can actually work together synergistically to optimize the use of its respective resources, which are resources coming from the pockets of the Filipino people. Okay, so this is a concern. Our efforts to establish watershed management councils, this is one way. Okay, this is one way of achieving or promoting collaboration and coordination amongst concerned agencies. But we need to work on other mechanisms, okay, that will become the greater fundamental or solid basis for the collaboration and coordination of concerned national government agencies. And watershed management is also about promoting coordination and harmonization and synergy of various programs. Okay, probably so related to the different government national agencies, different national government agencies. They have their own programs. And these are some of the programs that we can identify. This is not even exhaustive or nearly exhaustive. Okay, these are just what came to my, to my mind when I was doing this particular slide way back, last year, by the way. Okay, so these are just some of the projects and programs, that we have in the watershed. Now, if they are just, if they are just going to be programs and projects that are moving in parallel with one another, then it's going to see how all these programs will actually come together and achieve one unified goal of promoting the sustainability of watersheds. Many of these programs are competing. They are antagonistic to other programs, and that in itself presents a problem that we need to address. Okay, If we're not able to address that, then many of these programs will be just wasting resources, again, coming from the pockets of Filipino people. We need to provide a platform and mechanism by which these programs can all be tied up together, neatly, maximizing or promoting efficiency of the use of resources of these different programs. And our task also in watershed management is to promote collaboration and coordination amongst LGUs sharing one watershed. I think this is a reality, one of the realities that we need to understand, and this is usually a big challenge, okay, in watershed management, because we know that many LGUs, okay, that share jurisdiction of one watershed do not necessarily have the same priorities from the development point of view or from the environmental protection point of view. They usually are not the same, and hence that will be a challenge, on how we can harmonize those priorities and programs of the LGU so that they can again be maximized. Okay, they can be maximized to produce good results, overall for the entire watershed and all stakeholders within the watershed. Here you see 3 provinces sharing Agno River Basin. We have Benguet, and then midstream we have Pangasinan, and then on the western upstream area we have Tarlac. Okay, we have Tarlac, and with these 3 provinces sharing Agno River Basin, okay, it will be difficult for us to promote sustainability of Agno River Basin without these 3 provinces working together so that they will have a unified program, unified direction, unified vision for Agno River Basin. Easier said than done, but that is a challenge that at any rate, we need to address and overcome. So what are the principles and approaches of watershed management? 1, holistic and ecosystem based. Okay, again, as I said, a watershed is one whole system. Okay, we cannot compartmentalize watershed, okay, and just focus on one compartment and say that I'll just focus here. This will just be my concern. I don't worry about the other parts of the watershed. That belongs to another stakeholder or another organization or another communities or LGUs. Okay, we cannot have that same compartmentalized paradigm, that we traditionally have. Okay, of course, we're seeing more and more, this paradigm being broken down, into pieces, but we are seeing still a lot of this. Okay, a lot of this amongst LGUs and amongst government agencies. So we need to see more of more of holistic management of the watershed. Okay, that can be promoted by different agencies and LGUs. And then integrated use of land and other watershed resources. Okay, when we use the watershed for different purposes, when we use the watershed for different, I'm not supposed to show you that yet. Okay, when we use the watershed, okay, we must remember that any particular use in the watershed, whether it's in forest or whether it's in agriculture or whether it's in urban areas or coastal areas, any of these uses of this land part of the watershed will have consequence on the entire watershed, its functions, and the services delivered by the different ecosystems within the watershed. We cannot possibly use parts of the watershed without consequences on other parts of the watershed. That is the reality. And that is why, the use of land and other watershed resources is the center of watershed management. Because without the use component or the use dimension of the watershed, we can leave the watershed alone by itself and they will not have any problem at all, except probably trying to cope by themselves with natural stressors such as climate change. But remove people using watershed for different purposes, we then, we remove the problems associated with human-induced watershed degradation. But that is not, that is not the reality. Okay. Any particular land use change option or decision that we make translates to changes in ecosystem services. Now take a look at this illustration. This is just simplifying, just for the purpose of showing you that any land use change decision will have a commensurate impact on or alteration of ecosystem services. That for simplicity also we just presented here four ecosystem services, two productive or economic, and two ecological or environmental ecosystem services. Now, let's say that we decide to retain the original use of our land, which is forest, brush, agriculture, and urban. If we decide to retain them, it is likely that we do not see or we cannot expect significant change in the ecosystem services. Okay. But if we decide to convert grassland and agriculture to forest, then we will see increase in greenhouse gas reduction, meaning to say there will be gain, in greenhouse gas reduction. There will be gains in biodiversity. There will be gains in water, but there will be negative or loss in food production. Okay. But if we decide to convert forests and grass to agriculture, then we can expect losses in greenhouse gas reduction, losses in biodiversity, losses in water, and then gains in food production. And if we decide to convert forests, grass, and agriculture to urban areas, then we will see losses in all of these key ecosystem services that we have in this illustration. So keep in mind, any land use change decision that we make in a watershed translates to changes or alteration of ecosystem services. As a watershed manager, your task or our task is to make sure that the projected change in ecosystem services is still, will still be in totality, give us net positive change in the whole watershed. That is our goal, to result to as much positive gains as possible, given the many different demands to use the land for different purposes. That is the task of a watershed manager. And then another important principle, participatory and collaborative. I think I emphasized this quite enough already in the previous slides. Okay, all these government agencies need to collaborate with each other. And again, as I said, don't miss the next webinar series, because I'll talk about one particular physical framework that can unify these different government agencies. And then the LGU, in the leadership role will be very critical. Again, there are still a lot of challenges that we see here, such as the expertise, of the local government units that need to be boosted and developed. Okay, but those are things that we need to do. Okay, if we want the LGUs to take leadership role in this, and they are in a good position to be able to lead, because they are the ones with direct jurisdiction over our watershed areas, and hence, we need to engage LGUs in a very active and in a leadership capacity. And then community participation is very important. Okay, I have I think 7 minutes more. Participatory and collaboration of the communities or of the public at large, okay, in watershed management, from planning to implementation to monitoring. Okay, so we need them in the full cycle of watershed management. And I know that it's not always easy to do this. Okay, I just finished one project where we had engaged more than 3,000 stakeholders. Okay, that is in preparation of the Manila Bay Development Master Plan. And I can tell you that it was not easy at all, or it was not fun at all. If at all, it was very challenging. But I'm glad that we were able to do that in a very positive way. Not sure whether it's perfectly, but I know that it was satisfactorily, satisfactory, to the intention and need of our planning exercise. And it has to be science-based. Okay, it has to be science-based. Now, let me tell you, let me clarify what science-based really is all about. Okay, you see, in school, in our programs, we study about this. We study about water, groundwater, stream flow. We talked about what are the factors that affect groundwater and stream flow. We have climate, we have landform, we have soil. These are the direct factors that affect stream flow and groundwater. Okay, we studied them carefully. Okay, we studied them in watershed management, in hydrology, in soil and water conservation. Okay, we studied them, how the water and how the surface water and groundwater change. Okay, as we change these different factors. But of course, these are just the direct factors. There are other indirect factors, such as forest and biodiversity. Okay, that affects soil condition. Okay, and that alters soil condition, that will have an impact on stream flow and groundwater. Okay, so forest and biodiversity do not have a direct impact on stream flow and groundwater, except perhaps it's the impact of forest in consuming water. Okay, and using the water as loss from the watershed through evapotranspiration. Okay, and then land use is another indirect factor that affects forest and biodiversity, that affects climate, that can affect landform as well, and that can affect soil. Okay, but it cannot directly affect stream flow and groundwater. All right, so we study this. We study these pathways. We study these relationships between these different factors and understand them, at least trying to make a good sense of them quantitatively as much as we can. Okay, but of course, we know that we are not able to do that all the time. And then we have the knowledge, attitude, and practices. This is referring to the people in the watershed, okay, or people managing the watershed. Okay, that will have an impact on the way uses of land and uses of other resources are actually happening. But these are all being dictated, by one fundamental driver, and that is policy and program. Later on, we will hear a lot. We will hear something on the key policies and programs of the government, of DENR, and this is a vital part of the whole value chain, whole production chain of water resources. Okay, it is policy and program that dictates a lot of what happens with our attitudes and practices, with what happens to land use, to our forests, to climate change, to soil condition. Okay, that determines now what kind of water we will have in our watershed. And of course, it doesn't end there. We also study the impacts of stream flow, the impacts of groundwater, especially in relation to water-related risks, in relation to agriculture and industrial productivity, in relation to coastal and marine productivity. We study all of them. Okay, we study all of them, and this is the reason why we study them. Because as we manage our watershed, we need to apply We need to apply this understanding. Okay, we have to go, we have to veer away from the mostly intuitive way by which we make management decisions, okay, in the past. Okay, we have to put into use this understanding of this dynamics that is happening within the watershed. That is science-based watershed management. Sorry, I cannot elaborate further because I'm losing time already. And then, how important it is then to make sure that we monitor our watersheds. And, we are proud that DNR through FMB watershed section, under Forester Alice Castillo and in her staff, hardworking staff, that we have already, initially established monitoring stations, okay, in 17 or 18 watersheds, critical or priority watersheds in different parts or different regions of the country. And this is a good thing. And this is something that we must consider a vital part, an essential part, and an indispensable part of watershed management. We cannot practically, assume science-based watershed management without watershed monitoring, because that will tell us exactly, how do we respond in terms of various decisions and strategies, that we want to implement. Unless we have those information, unless we have those empirical data sets, it will be difficult. It will just be, for us responding intuitively, which is not bad, which is not bad in itself. But, if there is something that we can do to improve on that, why don't we? Why don't we then make watershed monitoring an essential part of watershed management? Okay, so again, okay, medyo sinirenahan ako, no? And it's just timely because I think this is actually my last slide, this one, okay? And this is the watershed management cycle, watershed characterization, watershed planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. I will discuss this. I will discuss this in the next webinar series, so don't miss it. Again, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to interacting with you in the Q&A portion. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation. So I think given more time, marami pa sanang impart si Sir Rex na knowledge for us, no? So sabi niya nga, abangan niyo yung next webinar, doon niya i-discuss furthermore yung mga concepts na sabi ni Sir Rex. Now to move on, I would like to call our second speaker for this webinar, for today's webinar, none other than Forester Abel. Sir, are you there?
Yes, sir. I will just share my screen.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Raymond, for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. I am Abel Lagon of the Forest Management Bureau, DNR. First of all, I would like to extend our gratitude for the organizers of this event for giving us the opportunity to virtually present the policies and programs in watershed management. So we would also like to thank the participants for having the time to be here today, at least virtually. And we hope you will find this material presentation relevant and useful for your personal and your organizational endeavors. Okay, the presentation will run in this order. I will be providing a brief background on the relationship of policy and programs and their context in watershed management. Also, I will also discuss some policies and programs that are existing and currently in place. Then finally, I will be providing some things to ponder with regards to the implications of some of the current events related to watershed management. So in general, policies are formulated to respond to identified issues and concerns. They are defined as framework or basic principles or directives or instructions rather, usually from the government, coming from the government, that dictate a decision and action towards a specific concern. On the other hand, programs are tools to implement the policies. So if you will notice, programs are more tangible representation of the policies since it has an output, a timeline, a budget, and it is broken down into specific activities. So this diagram on the right side of your screen shows the life cycle of a policy. I would like to emphasize a few things about this diagram. First, every policy and program starts with a problem. So yan. And second, the stakeholder engagement and consultation is imperative and should be considered throughout the process. And finally, policies are implemented through projects and programs. Thus, yung monitoring and evaluation natin is also an important for because it gives a room for evaluating the policies and it enhances the policies and provides whether it is effective or kailangan ng improvement in addressing the issues that are identified. So after defining the policy, a watershed policy, on the other hand, is simply a directive from the government towards improving the management of watersheds. So specifically, a watershed policy is composed of a set of guidelines and directives which aim to promote integrated protection, conservation and development of land, water, and other ENR resource, environment and natural resources within the watersheds to achieve its sustainable use. So in order to fully and effectively manage and protect the watersheds, watershed policies are necessary because we are dealing with the various resources. Meron din tayong yung mga nabanggit ni Sir Rex kanina na mga kailangan i-consider like yung LGUs, yung stakeholders. Before we proceed with the policies and programs related to watershed management, it is but logical to present and review some of the major ENR laws. So, yun yung mga laws na doon nag-emanate yung ating mga policies na ginagamit natin ngayon. Currently, all the policies and related to ENR and water management adhere to the yung mga laws na i-discuss ko dito, no. So pumili lang ako ng mga significant na mga laws na nagsusupport doon sa watershed management. So ultimately, the 1987 Philippine Constitution recognizes the protection and right of people to a balanced and healthful ecology with the rhythm and harmony of the nature. So moreover, yung constitution natin state that the lands of public domain are owned by the state. So yung the rest of our environmental laws emanate from this provision sa ating constitution. Further, the next is the revised forestry code or yung ating Bible sa forestry, which provides adoption of multiple use and sustained yield concepts on forest management. It also defines critical watersheds in relation to downstream infrastructure and facilities. It also prohibits commercial logging, grazing, and other operations within critical watersheds and even the protected areas. And finally, sa PD 705 din natin, the President is authorized to proclaim portions of the public domain as forest watershed reservations. So at least for the time nung martial law, nagkaroon ng mga presidential proclamation proclaiming some of our watersheds as watershed reservations. So 2 years after the issuance of PD 705, there was a growing concern in protecting a broad spectrum of the environment. So dito lumabas yung the Philippine Environment Code or PD 1151, which promulgates the conduct of a soil conservation program, including the identification and protection of critical watersheds, encouragement of scientific farming techniques, physical and biological means of soil conservation, and the short and long-term researches about effective soil conservation. Also, in 1987, yung dating Department of Energy and Environment and Natural Resources was reorganized into DNR. So it was organized structurally and functionally, and became the primary agency responsible for the conservation, management, and development of our country's natural resources. Okay, while the local government code is not actually an ENR related law, sinama ko siya dito because the management of watershed encompasses various LGUs. So it is very important na i-recognize natin yung primacy of the LGUs since yung watershed reservations natin fall under the jurisdiction of the LGUs. So the local government code or LGC states that the role of LGUs in the management of forest area within their jurisdiction. For example, yung preparation ng forest land use plan as input for the formulation of comprehensive land use plan, it entails improved management of their forest and forest resources. So there is actually a joint policy of DNR and DALG, including the LGUs anchored in this law, which aims to provide procedural guidelines on devolved forest management functions, which I will be discussing later yung details niya. And next, yung NAIPAS Act. It has also significant provision for watershed and proclaim watershed forest reserves where they are considered yung initial components. So from our 240 na protected areas, it was expanded to plus 94 protected areas through the expanded NAIPAS Act or yung RA 11038. So the next is the CBFM or Community-Based Forest Management, which was signed in 1995. So during this time kasi there was an idea of the forest dwellers to be regarded as partners, and they are the key to the development of the forest. So also yung dating Philippines 2000 and the government's social reform agenda supported the people empowerment and the full, meaningful, and indispensable participation of the communities, particularly yung upland dwellers natin, as immediate stakeholders of the forest lands were considered vital in the protection and management of the forest ecosystem. Next is the Executive Order 318 or the promoting the sustainable forest management in the Philippines. So it came into being because it was provided in the global plan of implementation of the World Summit in Johannesburg. So it was an international strategy, yung sustainable forest management, which was adapted naman dito sa atin. So yung EO 318 recognizes a watershed-based integrated ecosystem management approach, which is deemed appropriate for sustainable forest management due to the recognition yung dun sa mga ecosystem na nandun sa loob ng watershed are interrelated, and yung interactions nila ay may impact dun sa other ecosystems. And in 2011, with the growing concern ng environmental protection and yung increasing denudation of forest zones, and also the realization of the climate change impacts, yung EO 23 or the Moratorium on Cutting and Creation of Anti-Illegal Logging Task Force was signed. And in the same year, the National Greening Program through the EO26 was signed, which is considered to be the largest government-funded rehabilitation project, with the target of planting 1.3 billion seedlings in 1.5 million hectares of forest land. So this was extended in 2015. So per EO 193, NGP will be extended up to 2028. So there are a number of environmental laws which calls for the intensified protection of the ENR, such as the following, yung mga nakikita nyo sa screen nyo. For example, yung PD 1586 or the EIA system, which institutionalizes the EIA system, whereby socioeconomic undertakings are reconciled with the environmental quality. So nagkaroon ng valuation yung ecosystem through the EIA. And also, the government adopts the polluters must pay principle through the enactment of yung clean air, clean water, and yung ecological solid waste management acts natin. Also, the state also recognized the role of wildlife in the provision of ecosystem services. So ito na yung nabanggit natin kanina na yung even the wildlife has a role in providing the ecosystem services. And also, following the concept of ridge to reef approach and the role of coastal and marine ecosystems in providing food and protection for the communities, the Integrated Coastal Management Act was signed. And finally, yung Climate Change Act natin was signed in response to the UNFCCC objective to combat climate change impacts through lowering the greenhouse gas emissions. So the environmental laws and other related laws that I have mentioned were used as the basis or reference in the formulation of policies for improving the management of watersheds in the country. So these policies have objectives on improved management of ENR through the watershed approach. So pursuant to the 1987 Constitution, the government is committed to protect and manage the environment. This is emphasized in the Philippine Development Plan 2017 to 2022. Yung framework niya, yung naka-flash sa screen natin. So yung PDP sets the overall direction of the country in the coming years in terms of development. The PDP framework explicitly shows that the environment sector is considered a bedrock or foundation of in achieving the societal goal of the country, which is the inclusive growth, high trust, and resilient community and globally competitive knowledge economy. Consequently, the chapter for the environment, as stated in the PDP, which is yung chapter 20, recognizes ridge to reef approach or watershed approach and integrated area development as a means to intensify sustainable management of natural ecosystems. And anchored with the PDP, merong version ang environment sector dito, which is the 2021 to 2040 ENR framework. This is anchored in the PDP, SDGs, and the Ambition Natin 2040. It is a sectoral plan for the environment, which was recently signed by the Secretary of the DNR in 2020. And yung ENR framework provides a multi-year framework for integrated planning and shall serve as a blueprint and roadmap for sustainable development of ENR in the country. So the formulation of the ENR framework was based on the sectoral plans of the various bureaus within the DNR, such as the first, yung ating Philippine Master Plan for Climate Resilient Forestry Development dito sa FMB. The ERDB's Research and Development Plan was also considered, and the BMB's Philippine Biodiversity Strategic Action Plan, and the Land Sector Development framework of the Land Management Bureau was also considered. So basically, yung ENR framework provides a menu of the strategies that will be used for managing the ENR in a holistic manner through the watershed integrated ecosystems management approach. So be it watershed approach, integrated area ecosystem management approach, or synonymous lang yung term na yun. We are all referring dun sa watershed approach na tinutukoy natin. And in relation pala dun sa dinidiscuss ni Dr. Rex Cruz kanina, the overall goal for the ENR framework is to ensure ecological integrity and improve socioeconomic condition of ENR-dependent communities through enhanced ecosystem services. Because we acknowledge that very vital yung ecological integrity, the sustainability of the ecosystems to provide yung mga services doon sa tao. So yun ang ina-address natin, yun ang strategy natin in order to combat the impacts of climate change. So ini-strengthen natin yung ecosystems, ginagawa nating ina-achieve natin yung integrity nung watershed para makapag-provide siya ng basic services para sa mga tao. So now, moving on with the specific government policies, the next slides will show us the government policies related to watershed management. And of course, in line with the environmental laws, which I have run down in the previous slides. So pursuant to PD 705, Revised Forestry Code, Local Government Code, and the reorganization of the DNR, DAO 1992-330 provides for the guidelines of transfer and implementation of DNR devolved functions to the LGU. So based on this DAO, the devolution was specified per sector. Let's say yung forest management, meron siyang portion na ibibigay sa LGU, for PA, for lands, for environment, and meron din siya for mining. So for the purposes of this presentation, I would like to focus on forest management sector, which allows the LGU to manage and control communal forest, not exceeding 5,000 hectares. So yun yung nakalagay doon. And the function for the management, protection, and rehabilitation of small watersheds within the jurisdiction of the LGUs are devolved to the LGUs. The next one is the Joint Memorandum Circular 1998-01 to effectively implement the devolution of forest management functions and enhance the partnership of DNR and LGUs. This JMC, or the Manual of Procedures on DNR DILG-LGU partnerships, was approved. So basically, this JMC provides the detailed role of the LGUs from the barangay, from the municipal, and up to the provincial levels. And it also calls for the creation of a national steering committee and technical working group to ensure that the objectives of this policy is attained. The DAO 1999-01 is one of the milestone policy for watershed management, as it calls for the adoption of watershed and ecosystems planning framework. So this was signed in order to provide a national framework for the sustainable management of the country's resources. And it is also in line with the Philippine Agenda 21, which contains the essence of a national strategy for improved watershed resource management. So upon the signing of this DAO, so there was a significant impact in terms of designing and implementing DNR programs due to this policy framework. So realizing water as a vital resource, DAO 2001-29 was signed in order to institutionalize the integrated water resources management in the DNR programs and projects and also to strengthen the DNR role in the water sector. So this policy has recognized the rehabilitation of the river basin and watershed, waterways, and building of a strong partnership with the stakeholders as some of the objectives of the DAO. So hinighlight lang natin yung specific provisions pertaining to watershed management dito sa DAO na to. Also to further intensify the achievement of sustainable management of watersheds in the country, DAO 2005-23 was released in 2005 primarily to reiterate the basic concept and principle for improved management of the watershed. So it regards the watershed as multidimensional management of issues, and the people are part of the watershed since they are dependent on the resources. So yun yung mga principles niya, no? Ecosystem-based watershed management. The next one is collaborative and integrative management. This entails yung convergence and complementations of the resources to achieve the synergistic impacts of the efforts that are given, that are provided, or that are invested to the watersheds. And the third one is the capacity enhancement, which aims to increase the capacity of the stakeholders in watershed management. And lastly, environmental governance principles should be followed when implementing this order. So these are the responsive, participatory, accountable, transparent, systematic, scientific, and sustainable. DMC 2008-05 sets another milestone in the management of watersheds by providing guidelines in the preparation of the Integrated Watershed Management Plan. This DMC prescribes the conduct of a watershed characterization in order to determine the current status of watersheds, and shall serve as some sort of baseline information and input to the Integrated Watershed Management Plan. So in order to provide details of this DMC, there is a specific technical bulletin or policy made by jointly by FMB and ERDB, which includes vulnerability assessment in the equation, or in providing the baseline, yung characterization kung vulnerability assessment natin. The details of this technical bulletin and other related is uploaded naman sa ating website sa FMB. It's called Technical Bulletin number 16-8 if you're interested. In 2019, another important policy is the DMC 2019-09. So it provides guidelines for the formulation of medium-term ENR plan using geospatial platform. While this is a planning-based initiative, its objective is simply to create a provincial, regional, and a national level medium-term plans, which encompasses all sectors through the watershed approach and the use of GIS, Geographic Information System. So the medium-term plans formulated through this DMC is consistent with the Integrated Watershed Management Plan, the FLUP, the CLUP, local climate change action plan, provincial physical framework development plan, and the like. And it provides the overall direction of the ENR management in the provinces and municipalities. And it proposes programs and activities that are spatially identified on the ground. Hence, the output of which can be used as a reference, or it can be used in policy proposal formulation of forward planning and annual targeting of the respective provincial and regional offices. So the intent actually of the PENRO plan is to have a single plan for the whole province. So i-consider niya lahat ng existing plans para gawing basis for policy, gawing basis for budgeting, and pwedeng ipasok sa planning since this is a planning document. And as mentioned in the various policies and in the ANR laws, convergence is a vital part of the watershed management. Hence, there is what we call a DADAR-DNR-DALG Joint Administrative Order 2021-01, which promotes convergence and the ridge to reef approach to achieve the goals of contributing inclusive growth and to reduce poverty. So the Convergence Initiative is a platform and a strategy to harmonize the plans and programs of various government and non-government offices using the watershed as a planning unit. So although this JAW was signed in 2021, the Convergence Initiative has already been formalized since 1999. And in support to the proposed Environmental Protection and Enforcement Bill, which is currently being deliberated before the House of Representatives, the department has recently issued a DAO, Department Administrative Order 2021-28, which allows or mandates the regional offices to have an environmental law enforcement and an environmental protection division composed of the various personnel coming from the EMB, MGB, PENRO, and SENRO. Of course, with the purpose of intensifying the enforcement and prosecution of all violations related to ENR laws, rules, and regulations. Given all the policies and framework for watershed ecosystem management approach and many more policies, so these are the guiding principles of the following programs. So for the DNR, there are various programs based on a watershed. Usually sectoral yung pagkakalapat ng mga programs, but it considers the watershed as a totality. So I will not go through the whole programs of the DNR, just to show you na merong initiatives bawat sector on coastal, on lands. I will focus on forestry related. No? So the first one is the National Greening Program, which is the banner program for the DNR, and it is a rehabilitation effort which maximizes the use of the local communities. So it's not just another rehabilitation effort. So it uses, meron siyang socio-economic side since it employs, may jobs generation siya, and the fruit-bearing trees that were planted can be used as, or the produce from this can be used by the communities. For another program is the intensified forest protection per Executive Order number 23, which provides moratorium. So based on this program, there is a national intensified forest protection program which neutralizes the illegal logging hotspot and prevent the occurrence of forest fires, and it aims to have a forest patrolling through the use of advanced technology and a system called Lawin. So nagkakaroon ng ino-note yung mga threats, and it will be sent to a cyber tracker, and then merong dashboard central office na makikita kung saan yung mga threats. So medyo based on records, the logging hotspot was reduced through the years. No? So the department is also focused on soil conservation and watershed management. There are 3 major initiatives related to this. Yung nabanggit na natin kanina, IWMP, the construction of erosion and water conservation, the installation of science-based and real-time watershed monitoring instrument. So for the watershed characterization, kung vulnerability assessment. So this is a vital requirement for the integrated watershed management plan, which is a tool for effectively managing the watershed. So makikita natin dito various programs, activities, and strategies. Also, we have initiative on providing small water impounding system technology in order to ensure sustainable supply of water in the established plantations or the ones covered in NGP. Likewise, it also helps in stabilizing soil conditions through reducing the impacts of severe erosion. So to date, meron tayong 700 units of Swiss constructed with around a total of 74,000 cubic meters na capacity. So we also have soil conservation measures, erosion control. Merong structural and vegetative. Structural like gabions and check dams. And vegetative hedgerow plantings like watling and the use of bamboo as riverbank stabilization. Also, this is a huge leap in the management of watersheds in the country. Yung implementation ng science-based real-time monitoring where hydrologic and meteorological processes in the watersheds are monitored and then nababato siya sa isang database which will be the basis of policies and decision making. So this is in partnership with the Pag-asa. And at present, we have 47 automated weather stations nationwide, 16 automated water level stations strategically located in the critical watersheds. And meron tayong CTD, conductivity, temperature, and depth na sensors to monitor naman yung quality ng ating groundwater. In terms of foreign assisted projects, meron tayong FMP and INREM. Forestland Management Project, it's a 10-year DNR JICA project which aims to strengthen forestland management in the 3 critical river basins. So yan yung sa Upper Magat and Cagayan, Pampanga River Basin, Halaur, and Halaur. For INREM, it addresses unsustainable management practices in the 4 river basins naman. Like Chico, Wahig, Inabanga, Upper Bukidnon, and in Lake Lanao. And this is the last slide, no? So here are some of the implications of the most pressing current events in watershed management. We have identified yung Mandanas ruling or the EO 138, which will affect the management of watershed, particularly on the functions or indicated in the section 7 of local government code. So this includes the full control and review over community-based forestry projects, management and control of communal forests, pollution control law, small-scale mining, and hydroelectric for local purposes. So it should have been completed in 2024. So yun yung timeline. Also, pandemic has brought various impacts on the policies and programs of watershed management, mainly due to the health and safety quarantine protocols. For example, yung ating limited mobility yung sa DNR personnel to conduct their activities, and there is a decrease in the production and transport of forest products and the delay in the implementation of various products. And finally, as mentioned by ASEC Amaro and also by Dr. Rex, there is an effort to strengthen the policy on sustainable integrated forest management in the country. So the FMB, through the Forestland Management Project, has initiated a draft EO on promoting sustainable integrated watershed management in the Philippines, which calls to institutionalize the government support in integrated watershed management and the creation of multi-sectoral watershed management councils. So the draft EO is still currently in the DNR for its further review and evaluation prior to the endorsement to the President. So I think that's the last slide, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sir Abel. Okay, a round of applause for
Sir Abel or Forester Abel. So we proceed now to the meatiest part of our program, the question and answer part or the open forum. So I would like to invite our two distinguished speakers, Sir Rex and Sir Abel or Forester Abel, to kindly open their cameras. Please, thank you. Sir Rex, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. Okay, so sir, kindly open your camera so we'll proceed to the open forum. Thank you, yan, sir. Okay, so some reminders, okay, for our house rules. Okay, if you wish to speak, click the raise hand button on the unmute if you have given the signal. And of course, for questions, if you have more questions, kindly put it in the Q&A tab ng Zoom. Okay, so let's go, sir. So first questions for I think this is for Sir Rex from Eric Buduan from Forest Foundation. How can we address the ever-increasing population and expansion of farms in the watershed?
Okay, how can we prevent the expansion?
How can we address, sir? Address the increasing.
How can we address?
Yeah.
Yes, expansion of agriculture into forest land is an issue of land use. And unless we have an effective land use development controls that governs the conversion from forest to agriculture and from agriculture to urban, it will be difficult to address that. So it's an issue that can be addressed if we, for instance, have a national land use framework, which has been in Congress at the same time, as almost the same time as the sustainable forest management, but until now, have not been acted upon. And when I was a director of FDC, from 1995 to 2000, I regularly attended the public hearing or the committee hearing, on that National Land Use Act, and yet nothing happened because apparently, there were many strong lobbies at that time coming in from the legislature itself. So it's a big task, but if we have to do it, then it can be done. But you know what? It can be done if the local government units can exercise or will exercise their powers. They can do it at their level without the need for National Land Use Act. So it's really just a matter of improving the way LGUs conduct their or develop their comprehensive land use plan, and then committing to implement their comprehensive land use plan through the zoning ordinances.
Okay, so yun. LGU pala ang important component doon sa pag-address ng increasing population ng farm sa watershed. So next question, I think either of the two sirs can answer this. This is a question from Charlu Ormega from the Menro of Sablayan Occidental Mindoro. And his question is, other than agriculture, does mining have effects to watersheds? We all know that mining operations are within watersheds. How does the DENR harmonize their goals in watershed conservation protection? So who would like to answer the question?
That's what I said. Anything you do inside the watershed will have consequences on the watershed. And there's nothing that that we do in the watershed without any consequences, be it positive or be it negative, but invariable. Invariable. In some areas that will be impacted, it will be significant, but in other areas it will not. Question: will mining affect hydrological processes? Yes, I think there have been studies already that show that it does affect the hydrological cycle. But the question is, how do we harmonize this along with the other goals of watershed management? Because definitely mining, is a valid concern, or is a valid objective in watershed management. But yes, the challenge lies in harmonizing this with other goals, especially harmonizing it with the goal of promoting ecological and environmental stability in the watershed.
Forester Abel, would you like to add something to the Sir Cruz statement? Anything to add to that?
I think sagot naman ni Dr. Rex yung tanong.
Okay, so let's proceed. I think this question is directed towards Forester Abel. So this from Forester Celso Diaz. Have you conducted any study in assessing how effective and efficient the different approaches you are applying to enhance the sustainability of the watershed ecosystem services? Gusto niyong ulitin ka? Let me retweet. So from Forster Celsopedia, the question, have you conducted any study in assessing how effective and efficient the different approaches you're applying to enhance the sustainability of the watershed ecosystem services?
Thank you for that question. No. Actually, for every policy or program that is being formulated, meron siyang kalakip na monitoring and evaluation na aspect. So, for the level of program monitoring, there are assessments being conducted. But of course, for when we are referring to specific policies naman na proven and meron na siyang relationship or adherence dun sa existing laws, meron namang mga studies na outside the DNR na ginagawa yon. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Take this for Sir Rex.
And can I add
Oh,
to
sure,
what
sure.
Abel
Yes, sir.
said, you know?
Okay. Sorry, sir.
Because I think that is a very important question, you know, and the only way by which we are able to gauge the efficiency, you know, ng ating mga management strategies, policies, you know, programs, projects, is to have a regular monitoring, you know. That brings us back to the monitoring issue, you know. And FMB has started doing that, you know, with the real-time watershed monitoring systems set in 18 sites, you know, across the country. That's the beginning, you know. And again, as I said, if we can make that as an essential part of watershed management, then, you know, that will be a tool that will tell us, or that can help us gauge, you know, the efficiency of our policies, of our programs, you know. Of course, pag napasa din yung law on national capital accounting, you know, that will be also, you know, will also be a tool, you know, to keep track of the efficiency of our programs in watershed management.
Thank you, sir.
Mag-add lang din ako, sir.
Okay, so go ahead, Sir Abel.
So the question is, meron kasi tayong bureau, yung ERDB. They conduct yung mga ganong klase ng mga studies. So yung ERDB yung bureau na makakasagot.
Okay. So next question, this for Sir Rex. Sir Rex, how do I know if watershed? This is a question from Antea Jane Kaha. So how do I know, or how would I know if a watershed plan exists for my area? Any ideas where to find information about existing plans? And is there an existing step-by-step process that can be followed in developing a watershed plan?
Yung last question, yes, there is. There is a technical bulletin that was issued by the DNR, through FMB, and you can use that, you know, while that is, you know, that is also being reviewed for improvement. And then on the issue of whether you have, or how do you find whether you have a watershed management plan or not in your area, most likely you don't have, if you don't know it, because you know, a good watershed management plan should be one that is well participated in by concerned stakeholders, just like you are. I'd like to assume or believe that you are a concerned stakeholder, and if you don't know whether there is management plan or not, then probably you don't have one. But you can approach your CENRO, you know, and you can also message the watershed management section of FMB to find out if there is already one watershed management in your area.
Thank you, Sir Rex. Okay, next question for Forester Abel. Okay, this question from Eric Buduan again from Forest Foundation. Given the numerous and sometimes overlapping policies, not just with the DNR, but also with other government agencies. How can we harmonize these policies to be more relevant, effective, and responsive to the current realities of our forest lands and watersheds?
Thank you for that question. As I've mentioned earlier, meron tayong DADAR, DNR, DILG na initiative. It's a convergence initiative, and one of its component is the policy advocacy component, which aims to harmonize existing overlapping policies. Well, that is for sustainable rural development, and yung mga included na policies doon are related sa DADAR, DNR, and DILG. For other policies naman na meron tayong overlapping, I think DNR is also, pagdating sa DNR is also having some engagement on how to resolve yung mga policies natin. For example, yung policies with the DABFAR on mangrove and fish pond, yung pagre-revert ng mangrove and other policies. So usually ginagawa natin yan ng kung meron tayong problem, makakarating naman yan sa mga policy offices natin, and gagawa ng investigation and gagawa ng working group to handle that kind of overlapping policies. Well, depending on kung anong level ng overlapping yon. So for the ENR sector dito sa DNR, so ganun, at least ganun yung process.
Rex, would you like to add to that? Any additional statement for that?
No. Okay na yung sinabi niya, ni Abel.
Okay. So let's proceed. Next question. I think this is for Sir Rex. Okay. So considering the multiplicity of land uses such as urban, forestry, agroforestry, agricultural, ecological, forest, protected areas, biodiversity, and other land uses in watersheds, have you thought of a policy that will derive the best and optimal carrying capacity of the different watersheds in the country?
Wala pa tayo niyan, no? We still don't have that kind of tool. Meron tayong mga rule of thumb such as, for instance, ano ba dapat yung minimum forest cover that we must have in a particular watershed, no? May rule of thumb tayo, ginagamit natin 40%. Now, whether that is efficient or not, meaning to say, we are using our land efficiently if we say 40% is covered with forest, and that will give us good water and other ecosystem services, that remains to be seen. But we use that nonetheless, it seems like a good number. So wala pa tayong ganyang tool, and it came out also, I think, during the last webinar, no, yung related to health card, we can develop such one, no, and hindi pa kami nag-uusap ni Alice, hindi pa nagpapatawag si Alice ng meeting, We're supposed to talk about that and see how we can develop such a tool, no? Kasi related yung health card sa anong tawag dito, yung the right balance, no? The right balance of land use. Okay.
Sir, follow-up question to that from Roman Corpus. So, idugtong ko lang po. So, sustainable watershed management is really complex system, as discussed by you, sir. What do you think are some specific skills or expertise that are needed to be developed by watershed managers to effectively implement site-based watershed management?
Oh, okay. So dapat meron siyang systems thinking, number one, no? Dapat systems thinking talaga, hindi dapat yung naka-focus yan, especially yan on the ground yan, di ba? May on the ground project lang yan. He must be just, very focused, let's say, on agroforestry, as a project, but he cannot just be that, no? He cannot just be an agroforestry minded person or manager, but he must be a systems manager person. In other words, he must be aware and conscious about everything else that is happening in relation to agroforestry, okay, and its impacts on the other areas in the watershed. So dapat ganon yung thinking ng first and foremost, no, systems thinking minded manager.
Okay, another question for Sir Rex.
When is it considered a watershed is in a critical condition and needs to be rehabilitated?
Yeah, yan yung sinasabi ko kanina, no? If a health card, then we will be able to tell, at least with some sort of a quantified basis, but because we don't have that, then we just look at the condition, for instance, of our forest. No, so if we're saying that the forest cover is already 20, less than 20 or 10%, we say that they are now in critical state, because we said na ang thinking natin 40% is the ideal, no? So, but I do believe that 40% forest cover may be more than enough, in some areas, or maybe less in another watershed. But we have to still develop that kind of metric, to be able to determine that.
Another follow-up question, sir. Anonymous questionnaire. Question. Is the watershed approach? Can the watershed approach be used for the updating and crafting of the CLUPs of LGUs, which includes the
Yes,
FLUP as component? Yes, sir.
definitely, yes. Yes, definitely. We have a newly approved project ng DOST. It is a policy advocacy program using the watershed ecosystem approach for updating comprehensive land use plan, developing LCCAP, DRRMP, FLUP, and other spatial development plans na mandated para sa LGUs. We have done that for one LGU, General Nakar, and we will be doing that next for Los Baños, of course, from my hometown, and also in San Gabriel, La Union, which is a long-term partner in watershed management. So we're going to use those as our show window. We will be having many online training, capacity building on that, using yung dalawang sites natin as our venues. Okay. So anyone interested? Actually, may isang related tanong dyan. Browse ko kanina kasi yung mga
yes, sir.
May tanong kanina, no? Do we provide technical assistance for doing that, no? Yung developing watershed management for LGUs? The answer is yes. So you can just contact me, PM me, Rex Victor Cruz Messenger, no, or with my email, address. So or through FDC as well, no, you can contact me. So we are doing that as a matter of our public service, no, or extension program of the university, of CFNR specifically.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Okay, next question. This is from Juvelin Salazar, directed to Forester Abel. The current LGU code does not mandate the creation of the MENRO, but it's just an option. That's why there are still LGUs who have no position over establishing MENRO office. How can DENR and even DILG push these LGUs to establish and ensure the LGUs must create this position and the office to be effectively managed?
Well, thank you for that question. While it is true na the creation of an environment office is not a must in the local government unit. So it's in the discretion of the local government unit whether it feels the need to have the MENRO office, since for DNR meron naman tayong CENRO offices which covers some or most of the municipalities. So yung mga LGUs na covered na mga CENRO natin may also opt to have MENRO depending on the yung status ng kanilang environmental degradation or sa area. So the DNR may through its programs makakatulong sa mga LGUs, since yung mga ating mga batas naman is the end implementing office for the ENR laws are mostly LGUs, no? So ang magagawa naman ng DNR dyan is to provide support to the LGUs, prescribe technical assistance and other assistance as provided by the ENR laws.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, dami pa question. Sir, would you like to add?
Yeah, pwede magdagdag doon sa sinabi ni Abel, ano? Yun ang isa. I think, I believe na kinakailangan na maging mandatory yung Menro, no? Magiging stronger yan eh. May Menro ka na, meron ka pang Senro partnership, no? Napaka-perfect niyan for an LGU, We know LGU does not have enough people di ba? Kahit na maging mandatory yan, maglagay sila ng Menro diyan, iisang tao lang yan usually or mayroon siyang isang assistant na may iba pang ginagawa, no? So, whether may Menro na o whether that tawag dito, if ever na maging mandatory yan, no? Tama si Abel dapat naka-assist pa rin diyan ng Senro, because of the fact na wala silang enough human resources and expertise, Pero pag pinag-partner mo yan, meron ka ng mandated na Menro office, no? I mean, we will see more positive results in terms of implementation of ENR projects, no? I just want to mention this because it is relevant to the issue, no? Si Abel kasi ENP, good for him, no? Si Abel then can participate, no? Can be authorized to prepare management plan, no? For forestry and watershed management. But I am afraid that in the future, no, pag halimbawa naging mandatory na yung Menro, that graduates in forestry may be excluded, no? May be excluded from being appointed as Menro, unless it is specified in a law that will compel all LGUs to set up their own Menro office, no? Kapag hindi doon sinama na pwede ang foresters, licensed foresters, then foresters will be definitely excluded, no? Ang mapapaupo lang diyan will be mga ENPs, no? And I am concerned about that because foresters are now prohibited are not disallowed, no? Are now disqualified from taking ENP, no? Licensure examination.
Okay.
Anyway, that's trivia lang yan, but I want everybody to be aware of that.
Thank you for providing us the trivia, sir, or information. Hindi naman na pwede. Parang double na license. Okay, so let's proceed.
Pwede yon. Si Abel nga, dalawang lisensya niyan ENP at saka ENP at forester.
Ngayon po, hindi na. Pwede na.
Yes, ngayon hindi na. And
okay.
I think that is not positive at all. No?
Okay, so marami po kong questions. So I think we have more time pa naman. I think for three more questions. So this next question from Ma'am Elsa Santos. So collaboration and coordination to attain sustainable watershed management requires multiple and multi-level decision-making and enabling policies. This also requires transfer of power, funds, and enabling voices. So which agency should initiate the holistic and ecosystem-based management, integrated use of land and other watershed resources, and ensure participatory and collaborative processes in management? So if we wish to fast track this, then we will need new policies that are secured to Republic Acts. Yun, sir.
Yeah, ideally that should come from the top, no? That should come from the top. I always believe that if we want to have national government agencies working together, collaborating with one another, it has to come from the top. Meaning to say, it has to come from the president, to dictate a development paradigm, that there will be a unified framework for development programs of all government agencies, no? Ngayon meron naman may kine-claim tayo yung ating PDP, but I don't think that is a unified framework, Ang tingin ko diyan, while there is a semblance of putting them together in a PDP, the framework is still the integrative framework is still not there, and that integration must begin from the ground level. Okay, now because it takes time, there is a lag time and merong inertia yan, for the change to come from the top. It should not prevent the local government units to do that, in their own jurisdiction. And as shown in the case of General Nakar, it can be done at the LGU level. Basta willing ang local government units, to make sure that all their sectoral plans are integrated using a common framework. Okay, and that is the watershed ecosystem framework, which we have, again, as I said, done for General Nakar. So, yun, ideally from the top. Pero kung hindi mag-move from the top because of many reasons, and we are seeing that happen, then hopefully we can help the local government units, start doing that on their own.
Thank you, sir. So for Forester Abel, from Juan Sherwin Ramosa, what is the role of EIA or Environmental Impact Assessment in watershed management? How is it implemented and is it effective? I think either can answer this. But Sir Abel, the question was for you.
Thank you for the question. So maybe Sir Rex can answer after I provide a response to the question.
Kaya mo yan, Abel.
so, so I have provided yung EIA system doon because it dictates the limit and it provides conditions for providing a project in a watershed. For example, for mining companies that are situated in watershed areas. So that's where the role of DNR comes in, no? So siya yung parang magre-regulate, and it would help na evaluate kung ano yung mga environmental, yung mga ecological services na mababayaran. So that's one way of using EIA system in managing the watersheds. So if EIA, the question is if EIA is an effective tool in this type of management. It depends on the project siguro, no? For example, mining. Syempre, mining is quite, alam naman natin yung impacts ng mining. And how for other projects naman na ilalagay sa watershed, of course, I think the EIA system is effective since it provides yung mga thresholds and kung ano yung mga payments sa damages ng ecosystem. So, hindi pa naman nare-revise hindi pa naman nagkakaroon ng additional revision ng EIA system. Wala pang mga daw na lumalabas for ano. So, I think yung paggamit ng EIA system sa watershed management is quite effective naman. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Abel. So Rex, may add pa tayo?
Pagdating sa mining, I agree with Abel na 100%, no. Pagdating sa mining, para lang ma-strengthen pa yung usefulness ng EIA, to promote and protect the sustainability of our watersheds. Ang talagang kailangan natin dito pagdating sa mining, programmatic EIA, no. Programmatic talaga dapat 'yan, no. We cannot do project-based EIA for mining especially in one watershed, no. Pag yan ay nasa isang watershed lang, no, and there are 2-3 mining areas there or mining projects, kinakailangan programmatic ang EIA diyan to once and for all determine, how far can mining activities be allowed in the watershed without compromising the other ecosystem services within the watershed, no. Pag ginawa mo project-based yan, then you are not able to capture the combined impacts of all mining projects in the watershed. Kaya kinakailangan programmatic.
Thank you, sir. So I think this will be the last question para meron pa po kasi wala na rin tayong time and we still have to continue on with the program. So I think this is the last question. I think this from the first part ng presentation is Rex, So it appears that urbanization nowadays cannot be controlled. How can we put balance between urbanization without compromising the watershed ecosystem? And also, is there a clear threshold information or tool in order for the decision makers to disapprove any development undertakings that would somehow affect the various ecosystem associated with the watershed?
Yeah. Mag-start ako doon sa huli kasi yun ang natandaan ko very clearly, no?
Okay,
Yes,
sir.
no, may mga development controls tayo, no? Beginning from the local government units, no? Meron silang mga zoning ordinances eh. And assuming na yung zoning ordinance nila, no, emanates from a robust comprehensive land use plan, dapat magandang ano yan, dapat yan na yung pinakamagandang policy instrument, you know, to control and regulate urban developments, no? That includes urban expansion, no? Ang mahirap lang kasi kapag hindi nga maganda din yung CLUP na pananggagalingan ng zoning ordinance, or minsan may zoning ordinance pero hindi na ginagamit yung CLUP, then that's the problem, no? That's where the problem begins, and that's where the problem of accommodation becomes a common source of land use conflict, no? Para lang ma-accommodate yung request ng isa, yung application ng isa, you know, and dinidisregard na yung comprehensive land use plan, which is supposed to be implemented through zoning ordinances, no? So sa akin, maayos lang natin yan at the local government unit levels, you know, then we can see more efficient use of our land resources, no? And then we can regulate yung urbanization. But of course, there are other development controls, no? The government can, for instance, strengthen yung policies sa urban areas, you know, on optimizing the use of spaces, you know, densification, vertical developments, no. These are strategies that can be focused on to maximize the use of urban spaces, no, and improve mo yung access to basic services, waste disposal, yung increase mo yung iyong carrying capacity ng iyong mga basic services, water, electricity, you know, waste management, okay? Para, you know, you are able to maintain the quality of the environment within an urban system without really, you know, having the need to transfer to another area because the urban area now, you know, has become less and less desirable, no, for economic as well as for human settlements, no? Mang nangyayaring ganyan, no? So pag hindi mo na control ang development sa urban area, no, nagkaroon yan ng undue congestion, etc., and lack of access, you know, to spaces, maghahanap ng ibang area to occupy yan, whether that's industry or whether settlement, you know, in other areas. And usually agricultural areas ang tatamaan yan.
Okay, so it seems na marami pa tayong question, but time is limited. So try po namin i-forward yung mga questions nyo sa ating mga speakers and hopefully they can answer and find time for that. So I'd like to call on my colleague, Michiko Teresa Buot. Proceed na po tayo sa next part of the program, which is the awarding of certificates for our speakers. Mitch?
Ayan, thank you so much to our research speakers and to our moderator, Mr. Raymond Cabrera. We will proceed to the awarding of certificates to our speakers. I will just read the citation. The Certificate of Appreciation is awarded to Dr. Rex Victor O. Cruz and Forester Abel D. Lagon, ENP, for serving as speakers in the Policy Forum Sustainable Watershed Management held this 27th of September 2021, organized by the Forestry Development Center through the UPLB Foundation, Incorporated, and in partnership with the Forest Management Bureau for the implementation of the Save Our Watershed campaign with support from the Information Technology Center, UPLB, via Zoom webinar. Given this 27th day of September 2021, signed ASEC Marcial C. Amaro Jr., Dean Marlo D. Mendoza, and Director Priscila C. Dolom. Before we move on, let us show our appreciation to our speakers by giving a virtual round of applause. Ayan, now on to the next segment. May I invite Dr. Dolom, ASEC Amaro, and to open their cameras and join us in this photo documentation. May I also request our speakers to hold their certificates as we take a picture, if you already have the hard copy of the certificates po.
Di ko makita yung sa akin eh.
That's all right, sir. I will just slowly pin you para po tayo pong lahat ay makasama po. I'll just add pin. Can my colleagues, the technical people here in Zoom, add pin? Sir, Mr. Raymond, are you here?
Yes.
Can you please add the pin? So spotlight, I mean spotlight them. Add spotlight.
Yes, already done it.
All right. Ayan. Speakers. Wait lang po ha. I think I need to put this. Ayan. Okay, so Mr. Raymond, Kuya Raymond, can you also open your cameras so that you can join? Ayan. Okay, so we will just take a picture po. Our documenter, please, Ate Jean, please take a screenshot as I facilitate the group picture taking. Okay, so give us your best smile. 1, 2, 3. Smile po. Ayan. So thank you so much to our speakers again. We may now put off our videos. And now I will just address questions about the e-certificates and presentations of the speakers. There are so many questions requesting and request po kasi sa chats. So we must address this quickly. The e-certificates and the presentations and other requested materials will only be given to you once you accomplish the post-evaluation form. So here is the link to the post-evaluation form. And also the QR code. You can take a picture of the QR code right now so that later on you can also fill up the form na po. Ayan. Anyway, you can leave the webinar later. As you leave the webinar later, you will be redirected to the post-evaluation page. Later on, during our announcement, I will again flash the post-evaluation link and QR code for those participants who wants to fill up the form right away. Ayan po. So thank you so much to our resource speakers, to those to ASEC, and of course to Ma'am Pre, our director, for joining the group picture earlier. But may I call on the director of FBC, Dr. Priscila Dolom, to deliver the closing remarks.
Thank you, Michiko. Thank you so much. A pleasant morning. Malapit na pong mag-12 to everyone. Let me take this opportunity to thank all of you for attending and actively participating in our third Forest Policy Etalks Watershed Webinar Series in partnership with the Forestland Management Project of the Forest Management Bureau, DENR. Today is the third of our webinar series on the Save Our Watershed campaign. With the theme Sustainable Watershed Management. In the preceding webinars, we discussed the valuation of watershed ecosystem services for policy in the Philippines and Malaysia, and the key features, functioning, and current status of watershed in the Philippines. For today, our theme is Sustainable Watershed Management, where we invited two presenters, Dr. Rex Victor Cruz of the UPLB CFNR and on Science-Based Watershed Management, and Forester Abel Lagon of the FMB-DENR on the policies and programs in watershed management. These two topics are very important or relevant to ensure the sustainable management of our watersheds. Dr. Cruz presented to us in details the realities of watershed management, which is a complex system. Sabi nga, multiple stakeholders, multiple demands, multiple functions and uses, multiple ecosystems and services, and with overlapping jurisdictions and programs due to the multiple LGUs and government agencies who have jurisdiction over our watersheds. He further discussed to us the goals and paths of environmental management or watershed management, as well as the principles and approaches of watershed management. He added the key activities in watershed management. It is like a cycle: watershed characterization, planning, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation. Forester Lagon shared with us the existing policies and programs on watershed management in the country. According to him, we have numerous ENR policies, legislations, laws, issuances, and programs on watershed management like watershed development, rehabilitation, reforestation, restoration, conservation, and protection. He informed us that there is a draft executive order on promoting sustainable integrated watershed in the Philippines, which is for endorsement to the President. Based on these presentations of our speakers and discussions during the open forum, we can say that it is possible that we can have a sustainable watershed management which is science-based and supported by policies and programs of the DNR and other organizations. These issues, concerns, and challenges, like for example, the land use conversion of our watershed areas, gaya nga po ng sabi ni Dr. Rex, the National Land Use Bill is very important. Kaya lang po, kasabay ito na Sustainable Forest Management Bill, which we have been filed since late 80s. Hanggang ngayon po, nandun pa rin sa Congress. Which kung ma-approve po talaga ito, maybe we can determine the efficient and effective land use in our watersheds. These issues and challenges, if we can consider these, maybe we can attain sustainable watershed management. With that, on behalf of the Forestry Development Center staff, we would like to express our gratitude to our Dean, Prof. Marlo Mendoza, the DNR ASEC Assistant Secretary for Planning and Foreign Assisted and Special Projects, and the concurrent Director of Forest Management Bureau DNR, Forester Marcial C. Amaro Jr. Maraming salamat po. To our speakers, Dr. Rex Victor Cruz and Forester Abel Lagon. Dr. Rex, from the very start po nitong aming watershed webinar speaker, siya po lagi nating speaker, and even up to the last. Our thank you. Thank you, maraming salamat po for sharing with us your knowledge and experiences and watershed management. To our participants from different sectors, agencies, institutions, academe, who are continuously attending and viewing our FDC webinar series, Forest Policy Etalks via Zoom and FB Live. We have 599 po sa Zoom and 179 participants po sa FB Live. Thank you very much. To the UPLB Information Technology Center, Mr. Maki Agsunod, thank you for always accommodating our requests. To the Forestland Management Project staff, headed by Forester Marcial Marlon Atienza, thank you for your assistance to us. Lastly, to the FDC staff, especially to Mr. Raymond Cabrera and Ms. Michiko Buot for serving our MCs and moderators. A big round of applause to all of you and congratulations. Before I close po, I would like to invite again lahat po sana kayo maka-attend ulit sa aming 4th webinar series on October 13, 2021 with the theme Enhancing and Sustaining Stakeholders' Participation in Watershed Management. Same time po, 9 a.m. to 12 noon. We will have 3 speakers po. We will have Dr. Rex Victor Cruz, Professor Marlo Mendoza, and Forester Anselmo Cabrera. Dito po, madidiscuss natin maigi yung Watershed Management Council and other institutions po. and other stakeholders in watershed management. Again, thank you very much po and mabuhay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ma'am. Before we end the webinar, here are some announcements. Follow us on Facebook and YouTube. Ayan, for more updates regarding webinars at UPLB Forestry Development Center. Like and follow our partners' social media as well. Ayan. And then next announcement, mark your calendars for the last 2 webinars of this series. We will post specific details regarding this webinar soon on our Facebook page. And this is on October 13, katulad po ng sinabi ni Dr. Priscila Dolom kanina. She included all the details, but we will definitely post for more about this on our Facebook page. So watch out lang po. And then of course, the next and the last webinar will be on November 3. Ayan. So again, here is the post-evaluation link and the QR code. Kindly accomplish the post-evaluation on or before October 4, 2021 at 1 p.m. Anyway, katulad po ng sinabi ko kanina, when you leave the webinar later, once you leave, you will be redirected to the post-evaluation page po agad. Once accomplished, you may email us at fdc.uplb@upedu.ph for the request of the presentations of the speakers. For those who wish to replay this webinar, you may find it on our Facebook page at UPLB Forestry Development Center. Later on, we will be uploading them on our YouTube channel at UPLB Forestry Development Center as well. That is it for the announcements. And again, thank you so much for joining and supporting the Forest Policy Etalks. Goodbye and see you on the next one. Before we leave the webinar room, let us watch this video on Save Our Watershed to know more about our advocacy.